The officiant asked if anyone objected to this union, and my daughter reached into her bridal bouquet and handed me a folded piece of paper. As I opened it with trembling fingers, my entire world tilted on its axis. The words written there in her familiar handwriting made my blood run cold. But before the story begins, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Do not forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. Now, that morning had started like a dream. The kind of morning every mother imagines when she first holds her baby girl. The June sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the chapel, painting rainbow patterns across the white runner that stretched down the aisle. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, my heart too full of joy and anticipation to sleep. My daughter, Celestine, was getting married today. 28 years old, beautiful, radiant, and about to marry the man I believed was her soulmate. I stood in the bridal suite, watching as the makeup artist put the finishing touches on Celestine's face. My daughter looked like something from a fairy tale. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, tiny pearls woven throughout. The dress I had helped her choose 6 months ago fit her perfectly, a cascade of ivory silk and lace that made her look like a princess. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, the happy kind that mothers shed on days like this. Celestine caught my gaze in the mirror and smiled. That smile had been lighting up my life since she was born. I remembered the first time I saw it, in the hospital, when the nurse placed her in my arms. I remembered her first day of school, her high school graduation, the day she got accepted to medical school. Every milestone had been building to this moment. The groom was a man named Corwin. I had met him 2 years ago when Celestine brought him home for Thanksgiving. He was handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way, tall, with sandy blonde hair and an easy smile. He worked in finance, came from a good family, treated my daughter with what appeared to be genuine affection. My late husband would have approved. I had approved. Everything seemed perfect. Corwin's family had money, old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. They lived in a sprawling estate an hour north of the city. His mother had been polite but distant when we met, the kind of woman who measured her words carefully and smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. His father was gregarious, loud, always ready with a joke or a story. They seemed like good people, successful people, the kind of people who could give my daughter the life she deserved. The morning progressed in a blur of activity. The photographer arrived, snapping pictures of Celestine in her dress, of the bridesmaids in their sage green gowns, of me helping my daughter with her veil. The florist delivered the bouquets, enormous arrangements of white roses and peonies. Everything was going according to plan. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, I would later realize. I should have noticed the tension in Celestine's shoulders. I should have paid more attention to the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at her bouquet. I should have listened more carefully when she said she needed to talk to me, but then got interrupted by the wedding planner asking about the seating arrangements. I should have known something was wrong. But I was too caught up in the joy of the day, too blinded by the beautiful surface of everything to see what was lurking underneath. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. By 1:30, the chapel was filled with guests. I took my seat in the front row, on the bride's side, and looked around at the assembled crowd. There were easily 200 people there. Corwin's side of the chapel was packed with well-dressed strangers, people from his firm, his family's society friends, business associates of his father. Our side was more modest. My sister and her family, a few of Celestine's friends from medical school, some neighbors, the handful of relatives we stayed in touch with. The disparity in numbers should have told me something. The music started and everyone stood. The bridesmaids came down the aisle first, moving in careful, measured steps. Then the music changed to the wedding march, and there she was, my daughter, my beautiful girl. Celestine walked down the aisle alone. She had insisted on that. Her father had died when she was 15, a sudden heart attack that shattered our world. She said she wanted to walk herself down the aisle, that she was giving herself away, that it felt more honest. I had supported her decision, even though part of me wished I could have been the one to walk beside her, to literally hand her into this new chapter of her life. She moved slowly, gracefully, her eyes fixed on Corwin, who stood at the altar with his groomsmen. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, composed, smiling, the perfect groom. When Celestine reached the front of the chapel, she turned to hand her bouquet to the maid of honor, as rehearsed. But then she paused. She looked at the bouquet, then at me. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I saw something that made my stomach clench with sudden dread. Fear. My daughter was afraid. Before I could process what I was seeing, Celestine reached into the center of her bouquet and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded into a tight square. She had hidden it among the flowers. She took 2 steps toward me and held it out. Her hand was shaking. The entire chapel had gone silent, watching this unexpected deviation from the program. I took the paper from her trembling fingers, our eyes locked. She said nothing, but her gaze pleaded with me. "Read it," her eyes said. "Read it now." I sat down, my legs suddenly weak, and unfolded the paper. The world seemed to slow down as I read the words my daughter had written in her neat, precise handwriting. The handwriting I knew as well as my own. The note said exactly 7 words, but those 7 words shattered everything. "Mom, his family is hiding something." My hands began to shake. I read it again, hoping I had misunderstood. But no, the words were clear. I looked up at Celestine. She had turned back toward the altar, toward Corwin, but her body was rigid with tension. The officiant, seemingly unaware that anything was amiss, had begun the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." I couldn't hear the rest. My mind was racing, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the chapel must be able to hear it. What did she mean? What were they hiding? Why would she give me this note now, at this moment, when she was seconds away from saying I do? I looked at Corwin. He was staring at Celestine with what looked like adoration. But now that I was really looking, really seeing, I noticed something off about his expression. It was too perfect, too controlled, like a mask he had carefully arranged on his face. I shifted my gaze to his parents in the front row across the aisle. His mother sat with her spine straight as a rod, her face composed into pleasant neutrality. But her hands, I noticed, were clenched together in her lap so tightly her knuckles were white. His father was smiling, but there was something sharp in his eyes, something watchful. They knew I had the note. Somehow, they knew. My mind went back over the past 2 years, trying to remember any red flags I might have missed. Celestine had seemed happy with Corwin. She talked about their future together, about the house they were going to buy, about the children they would have someday. She had been excited about the wedding, involved in every detail of the planning. Or had she? Now that I was really thinking about it, Celestine had seemed increasingly withdrawn over the past few months. I had attributed it to stress from planning the wedding and finishing her medical residency. But what if it was something else? What if she had discovered something about Corwin or his family and had been trying to tell me, but I had been too distracted to listen? The officiant was talking about the sacred bonds of marriage, about commitment and love. I heard Celestine's voice, small and tight, repeating the words he prompted. "I take you, Corwin." My daughter's voice cracked slightly on his name. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. I knew that voice. I had heard it when she was scared as a child, when she would have nightmares and call for me in the dark. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my clutch. My mind was working frantically, trying to figure out what to do. Should I stand up? Should I object when the officiant asked? Should I grab my daughter's hand and pull her away from this altar, away from this man and his family with their terrible secret? But what was the secret? I had no idea what I was dealing with. For all I knew, it could be something relatively minor, a financial impropriety, or a family scandal. Or it could be something much worse, something dangerous. I thought about Celestine's note again. His family is hiding something. Not Corwin. His family. That distinction felt important. Was Corwin involved in whatever this was, or was he ignorant of it? Was my daughter marrying a good man from a bad family, or was he complicit in whatever darkness his family was concealing? "If you, Corwin, take Celestine to be your lawfully wedded wife," the officiant intoned. Corwin's "I do" rang out clear and confident. The officiant turned to Celestine. "And if you, Celestine, take Corwin to be your lawfully wedded husband?" There was a pause, a beat too long. I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment when my daughter could stop this, could say no, could run. But she didn't. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I do." I felt my heart break. Why had she given me that note if she was just going to go through with the ceremony anyway? What did she expect me to do with this information? The officiant smiled, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension radiating through the chapel. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Corwin leaned in and kissed Celestine. It looked like every wedding kiss I had ever seen, but I knew my daughter's body language. She was stiff, enduring rather than participating. When they broke apart and turned to face the crowd, she was smiling, but it was the saddest smile I had ever seen. The recessional music started. Corwin and Celestine walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. Celestine's eyes found mine as she passed, and in that moment, I saw pure desperation. She was trapped. She had married this man, joined this family, despite knowing something terrible about them, and she had given me that note not as a warning, but as evidence, in case something happened to her. The thought hit me like a physical blow. My daughter believed she might be in danger. She had left me a breadcrumb, a starting point for an investigation if the worst came to pass. And I had sat there and let her walk down that aisle into whatever nightmare awaited her. The chapel erupted in applause. People were standing, chatting, filing out toward the reception hall. I sat frozen in my pew, the note burning in my purse like a live coal. My sister touched my arm. "Are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just emotional. You know how mothers are at weddings." She laughed and patted my hand, then moved toward the aisle with her family. I stood on shaking legs and let the crowd carry me forward. The receiving line was torture. I had to stand there, smiling, accepting congratulations, watching my daughter's face as she greeted guest after guest with that brittle, fragile smile. Corwin had his arm around her waist, and I noticed how tightly he was holding her. Not affectionate, possessive. When I reached them in the line, Celestine hugged me. She held on longer than normal, and I felt her press something into my palm. "Another note." I palmed it smoothly. Years of being a mother, teaching me how to accept secret communications from my child. How many times had she passed me notes in church when she was little? How many times had we shared silent messages across crowded rooms? This was different, though. This was darker. As I pulled back from the hug, I looked into my daughter's eyes. "Help me," they said. "Please, Mom, help me." But out loud, she said, "Thank you for everything, Mom. This day has been perfect." The word perfect was weighted with irony so heavy it nearly crushed me. I moved on, greeting Corwin, who smiled at me with his perfect teeth and his perfect hair and his perfect mask. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to grab my daughter and run. Instead, I said, "Congratulations. Take care of my daughter." Something flickered across his face. Too fast to identify, but it was there. A crack in the facade. "Of course," he said smoothly. "She's my whole world. Lies." I could hear the lies now, could see them in the way his eyes didn't match his smile. How had I missed this before? How had I been so blind? I moved past them, past Corwin's parents who nodded at me with cold courtesy, past the groomsmen and bridesmaids, past all the trappings of this beautiful, terrible day. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and opened the second note. This one was longer, written in smaller handwriting, as if Celestine had been trying to fit as much information as possible onto the small piece of paper. "Mom, I don't have time to explain everything. I found something in Corwin's father's study 3 weeks ago. Documents, photos, evidence of something I still don't fully understand, but it's bad. Really bad. I think it involves illegal business dealings, maybe worse. I confronted Corwin about it, and he didn't deny it. He said his family has been doing this for generations, that it's just how business works at their level. He said if I tried to back out of the wedding or go to the police, his father would destroy you. He knows about your business, about the money troubles you've been having since Dad died. He said they would make sure you lost everything, that you would go to jail for fraud he would manufacture evidence for. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't let them hurt you. So I'm going through with it, but I need you to know the truth in case something happens to me. I've made copies of the documents. They're hidden in Dad's old tackle box in your garage, the one with the combination lock. The combination is my birthday. If anything happens to me, go to the police with those documents. Don't trust anyone in Corwin's circle. They have connections everywhere. I'm so sorry, Mom. I love you so much. Please forgive me for dragging you into this. I read the note 3 times, each reading filling me with more horror. My daughter had been threatened. She was being coerced into this marriage. And I had been so wrapped up in my own financial struggles that I hadn't noticed she was fighting a war I knew nothing about. It was true that I had been having money troubles. After my husband died, I discovered he had made some poor investments. I had taken out loans to keep our small business afloat, had refinanced the house. It had been a struggle, but I was managing. Barely. If someone wanted to frame me for fraud, they probably could. I didn't have the resources to fight back against people with the kind of money and power Corwin's family had. Celestine had sacrificed herself to protect me. My little girl had walked into a trap to keep me safe. The realization nearly brought me to my knees. I flushed the toilet to maintain the illusion that I was using the facilities, then emerged from the stall. A woman I didn't recognize was washing her hands at the sink. "Beautiful ceremony, wasn't it?" she said cheerfully. I managed a nod and a smile, then washed my own hands with shaking fingers. In the mirror, my face looked gray. The reception was held in a grand ballroom adjacent to the chapel. Round tables covered in white linens, floral centerpieces that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, a champagne fountain, a string quartet playing classical music. It was elegant, expensive, picture perfect. I found my assigned seat at one of the family tables. My sister was already there with her husband and kids. She was gushing about how beautiful everything was, how lucky Celestine was to be marrying into such a well-established family. I couldn't find my voice to respond. The wedding party was introduced with great fanfare, and then Corwin and Celestine entered as husband and wife. Everyone applauded. They moved to the dance floor for their first dance, and I watched my daughter in her husband's arms, watched her move through the choreographed steps they had practiced, and I saw the truth of what was happening here. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction, a business deal sealed with my daughter's life. Dinner was served. I couldn't eat. The food looked beautiful, some kind of chicken with elegant plating, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I drank wine instead, trying to calm my racing thoughts, trying to figure out what to do next. I had to get to that tackle box. I had to see these documents Celestine had found. But I was trapped at this reception for hours still. There would be toasts, cake cutting, more dancing. I couldn't leave without drawing attention to myself. And I had the growing, uncomfortable feeling that I was being watched. Several times during dinner, I caught Corwin's father looking at me. Not obviously, not in a way that anyone else would notice, but I felt his gaze like a physical weight. He knew something. He knew I knew something. The question was, what would he do about it? The best man stood to give his toast. He was another finance guy, someone Corwin worked with. His speech was full of inside jokes I didn't understand and references to Corwin's legendary work ethic and ambition. He described Corwin as a man who always got what he wanted, who never let obstacles stand in his way. It was meant to be complimentary, but it sounded sinister to my ears. Then it was the maid of honor's turn. She was Celestine's friend from medical school, a bright, funny woman I had met several times. But her speech was oddly stilted, as if she was choosing her words very carefully. She talked about how Celestine had always been the smartest person in the room, the most dedicated, the most principled, how Celestine never compromised on her values. The emphasis she put on that last part felt deliberate. I wondered if she knew something too. When the speeches were done, the DJ took over from the string quartet, and the dancing began in earnest. I watched Celestine dance with Corwin, watched them make the rounds of the tables, greeting guests. Every time she laughed at something someone said, every time she smiled for a photo, I could see the strain underneath. She was performing. We all were. I excused myself from the table, claiming I needed some air, and stepped out onto the balcony that overlooked the venue's gardens. It was cooler out here and blessedly quiet. I pulled out my phone, thinking I might call someone. But who? The police? And tell them what? My daughter had passed me cryptic notes at her wedding? They would think I was crazy. I heard the balcony door open behind me and turned, expecting my sister or perhaps a smoking guest. Instead, it was Corwin's mother. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from the ballroom, her face in shadow. "We haven't had much chance to talk," she said. Her voice was cultured, controlled. I thought perhaps we should. I gripped my phone tightly. About what? She stepped fully onto the balcony, letting the door close behind us. We were alone. About expectations, she said. About family. About the importance of discretion. My heart was hammering, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean." She smiled, but it was a cold expression that never reached her eyes. "I think you do. Celestine is part of our family now. That comes with certain responsibilities, certain understandings. We take care of our own, but we also expect loyalty, complete loyalty." The threat was barely veiled. I met her gaze. My daughter will always be my daughter, no matter whose ring she's wearing. "Of course," she said smoothly. "But I hope you understand that causing problems for Corwin would be causing problems for Celestine. And I'm sure you wouldn't want that." I felt cold all over. She knew about the notes, or at least she suspected. This was a warning. Back off, or Celestine would pay the price. Before I could respond, the balcony door opened again, and this time it was my sister. "There you are," she said cheerfully. "They're about to cut the cake. Come on, you don't want to miss it." Corwin's mother gave me one last meaningful look, then glided past my sister back into the reception. My sister frowned after her. "Was she bothering you?" "She seems a bit cold." I forced a laugh, just making polite conversation. Mother-in-law stuff. My sister linked her arm through mine. "Well, come on. This is supposed to be a happy day. Try to enjoy it." I let her lead me back inside, but enjoyment was impossible. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, trapped in a beautiful prison. The cake cutting was a blur. Celestine and Corwin posed with the knife, smiling for the cameras. They fed each other bites of cake, and everyone laughed. More dancing followed. I stayed at my table, nursing another glass of wine, watching, planning. I needed to get to those documents, tonight, as soon as I could leave without drawing attention to myself. Around 8 in the evening, Celestine and Corwin prepared to leave for their honeymoon. They were flying to the Caribbean, some exclusive resort. 2 weeks of tropical paradise. 2 weeks where my daughter would be completely isolated, completely under Corwin's control, thousands of miles from anyone who could help her. The guests gathered outside the venue as Celestine went to change out of her wedding dress. I stood in the crowd, clutching my purse with its hidden notes, feeling helpless and terrified. When Celestine emerged in a pale blue traveling suit, she looked impossibly young and vulnerable. She hugged various guests goodbye, making her way through the crowd. When she reached me, she held on tight. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you for everything. No matter what happens, know that I love you." I tried to hold back tears. "I love you too, baby. Be safe. Please be safe." She pulled back, and I saw her eyes were glistening. Then Corwin was there, taking her hand, guiding her toward the waiting car. The crowd threw rice and rose petals as they ran to the vehicle. Celestine looked back once, meeting my eyes, and then she was gone. The taillights disappeared down the long driveway, and I felt like I had just watched my daughter disappear into darkness. The reception was winding down. Guests were starting to leave. I found my sister and made my excuses, claiming exhaustion and a headache. She hugged me and told me it had been a beautiful day, and wasn't I so proud of Celestine? I agreed with everything she said, desperate to leave, to get home, to get to that tackle box and see what my daughter had discovered. The drive home took forever. Every red light, every slow driver felt like a deliberate obstacle. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, my mind racing through possibilities and scenarios. What had Corwin's father done? What business dealings could be so terrible that they were worth threatening and coercing a young woman into marriage? I thought about Corwin's father. He was a developer, I knew that much. Commercial real estate mostly, office buildings and shopping centers. He had projects all over the state. What if it wasn't just legitimate business? What if there was corruption involved? Bribery, money laundering, who knew what else? Or what if it was worse? What if the things Celestine had found evidence of were even darker than financial crimes? I pulled into my driveway and practically ran to the garage. My late husband's tackle box sat on a shelf in the back, exactly where it had been for 13 years since he died. I had never moved it, never opened it. It had felt too painful to disturb his things. I pulled it down now, my hands shaking. The combination lock was dusty. I spun the dial to Celestine's birthday and heard the satisfying click as it opened. Inside, on top of the fishing lures and line, was a thick manila envelope. I carried it inside, locked all the doors, closed all the curtains, and sat down at my kitchen table. For a long moment, I just stared at the envelope. Once I opened it, once I saw what was inside, there would be no going back. My life, and more importantly, Celestine's life, would never be the same. But I had no choice. My daughter needed me. I had failed to protect her from walking into this marriage, but I wouldn't fail her again. I opened the envelope and pulled out the contents. What I found made my blood run colder than I had thought possible. The documents were photocopies, but they were clear enough to read. Financial records, bank statements, transaction histories, and they told a damning story. Corwin's father wasn't just a developer. He was a front for a much larger criminal operation. Money laundering on a massive scale, moving funds for various organized crime groups. The real estate projects were just vehicles for cleaning dirty money. Millions of dollars flowing through shell companies and fake transactions. But that wasn't the worst of it. There were photographs too. Polaroids and printed digital photos. Images of men I didn't recognize in what looked like business meetings. Some of the photos were date-stamped going back 20 years. And in several of them, I recognized faces. Local politicians, a judge, a police chief. People who were supposed to be upholding the law, sitting in rooms with known criminals and Corwin's father, smiling, shaking hands, clearly in partnership. There was more. Ledgers detailing payoffs and bribes, names, dates, amounts. A detailed record of corruption reaching into every level of city and county government. This wasn't just a crime, it was a conspiracy, a network of powerful people all protecting each other, all profiting from illegal activities. And my daughter had stumbled onto evidence of all of it. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. No wonder they had threatened her. With what she knew, she could bring down dozens of powerful people. She could expose a criminal enterprise that had been operating for decades. They couldn't let her walk away, and they certainly couldn't let her go to the police. Marrying her to Corwin was a way of controlling her. As his wife, she couldn't testify against him, and as part of the family, she would be under constant supervision. If she tried to expose them, they would see it coming. They could stop her. They could silence her. The thought sent ice through my veins. I looked at the documents spread across my kitchen table. Celestine had been right to make copies. This was evidence, solid, documented proof of criminal activity. But what was I supposed to do with it? Going to the local police was out of the question. According to these documents, half the department was on Corwin's father's payroll. The judge who would see any case was probably compromised too. I needed to go higher. Federal authorities, the FBI, people who were outside the sphere of influence these criminals had built. But I had to be careful. If I contacted the wrong person, if word got back to Corwin's family, they would know Celestine had talked. And they would hurt her. They might even kill her. I needed a plan, a careful, strategic plan. I spent the rest of the night reading through the documents, making notes, trying to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. The criminal network was vast and well protected. Taking it down would require not just evidence, but a coordinated effort by law enforcement. And it would put everyone involved in danger, including my daughter, including me. By sunrise, I had made my decision. I would contact the FBI, but not until Celestine was back from her honeymoon. I needed her on American soil, where I could potentially get her to safety if things went wrong. 2 weeks. I had to wait 2 weeks while my daughter was isolated with a man whose family had threatened to destroy us both. It was going to be the longest 2 weeks of my life. I photographed every page of every document with my phone, uploaded them to a secure cloud storage account, and then put the originals in a safe deposit box at my bank. If anything happened to me, I had left instructions with my lawyer to send the access information to the FBI. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was something, an insurance policy. The days crawled by. I tried to maintain a normal routine, going to work, handling the business, acting like everything was fine. But inside, I was constantly terrified. I jumped at every unexpected phone call, every knock at the door. I kept expecting Corwin's father or his people to show up, to demand the documents, to threaten me directly. But nothing happened. The silence was almost worse than a confrontation would have been. On the 5th day of Celestine's honeymoon, I got a text from her. Just a simple message saying she was having a wonderful time, the resort was beautiful, she hoped I was doing well. It was the kind of generic message that could have been sent by anyone. I studied the words, looking for hidden meaning, for some coded message that would tell me if she was okay. But there was nothing, just bland pleasantries. I responded with equally bland pleasantries, telling her I was glad she was enjoying herself, that I loved her. I stared at my phone for an hour after sending that message, hoping for something more, some sign that my daughter was truly okay. But there was nothing, just silence. The waiting was torture. I barely slept, constantly imagining worst-case scenarios. What if Corwin had figured out that Celestine had made copies of the documents? What if he was hurting her right now, trying to force her to tell him where the evidence was? What if the honeymoon was just a ruse and he was actually taking her somewhere she could disappear? By the time the 2 weeks were up and Celestine was scheduled to return home, I was a wreck. I had lost weight, had dark circles under my eyes from lack of sleep. My sister called twice to check on me, concerned about how I was doing. I made excuses about being tired, about post-wedding letdown, about missing Celestine. All true, but not the whole truth. The day Celestine and Corwin were supposed to return, I waited by my phone obsessively. Their flight was due to land at 3 in the afternoon. By 5, I still hadn't heard anything. By 6, I was panicking. I called Celestine's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I tried calling Corwin's phone. It rang twice. Then someone picked up. "Hello, Mrs. Pierce?" Corwin's voice said. Smooth. Calm. Too calm. "Where's Celestine?" I demanded. "Is she okay?" "Of course she's okay," he said. "We just got home. She's in the shower." "Would you like her to call you back?" "No," I said quickly. "No, I just wanted to make sure you landed safely. I was worried when I didn't hear from you." "The flight was delayed," Corwin said. "Bad weather in the Caribbean. But we're home now. Everything is fine." "Everything is not fine," I wanted to scream. "Nothing is fine." But instead I said, "Good. Have Celestine call me when she can." "Of course," he said, and hung up. I stared at my phone. Everything about that conversation felt wrong. Corwin's tone had been too controlled, too careful. And why hadn't Celestine called me herself as soon as they landed? She knew I would be worried. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Celestine. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice sounded strange. Flat. "Sorry I didn't call earlier. The flight was really long and I was exhausted." "Are you okay?" I asked. "Really okay?" "I'm fine, Mom," she said. "Just tired. The honeymoon was nice. We had a good time." She sounded like she was reading from a script, like someone was standing next to her, listening to every word. I tried to convey everything I needed to say without actually saying it. "I miss you, honey. I can't wait to see you. We need to catch up. When can we have lunch?" There was a pause that lasted a beat too long. "How about next week sometime?" Celestine said finally. "Things are a bit hectic right now, getting back into the routine and everything." "Next week would be great," I said, my heart sinking. "I love you, baby." "Love you too, Mom," she said, and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, fear coiling in my stomach like a snake. Something was very wrong. I could feel it. Celestine never called me Mom in that tone unless she was uncomfortable or upset, and she was putting me off, delaying seeing me. Either she was being monitored and couldn't speak freely, or she had been warned not to contact me too much, or both. I made another decision then. I wasn't waiting any longer. The next morning, I drove to the federal building downtown. I asked to speak with someone from the FBI, and after considerable wait and several rounds of questions from increasingly senior agents, I found myself in a small conference room with two special agents. One was a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional. The other was a man around the same age with a weathered face and kind eyes. I told them everything. I showed them the documents on my phone, explained how my daughter had found them, described the threats that had been made. They listened without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, the female agent, whose name was Agent Reeves, leaned back in her chair. "This is an active investigation," she said. "We've been building a case against this organization for 2 years. Your daughter's documents are going to be crucial evidence." My heart leaped with hope. "So you already knew about this?" "Not all of it," Agent Reeves said. "We knew about the money laundering operation, and we suspected the scope of the corruption, but we didn't have hard evidence of the payoffs to public officials. These documents provide that evidence. We can move forward now." "When?" I asked urgently. "When can you arrest them? My daughter is in danger." "These things take time," the male agent said gently. His name was Agent Morrison. "We need to coordinate with other agencies, get warrants, make sure we can arrest everyone at once so no one has time to destroy evidence or flee." "Days, weeks," I pressed. "She's living with them. She's trapped in that house." "We understand," Agent Reeves said, "and we'll move as fast as we can. In the meantime, we'll put surveillance on your daughter. If she's in immediate danger, we'll intervene." I had to trust them. I had no other choice. They asked me to forward all the digital copies of the documents, which I did right there in the conference room. They had me sign some paperwork, gave me contact numbers for both of them, told me to call immediately if anything happened. As I left the federal building, I felt a tiny bit of relief mixed with ongoing dread. At least the authorities knew now. At least something was being done. But my daughter was still in that house, still married to that man, still surrounded by criminals. The next few days were agonizing. I heard nothing from the FBI, nothing from Celestine beyond a brief text saying she was settling into married life. I tried to go about my normal routine, but it felt like sleepwalking. Then, 4 days after my meeting with the FBI, my phone rang at 3 in the morning. I jolted awake, fumbling for the phone in the dark. When I saw Celestine's name on the screen, my heart stopped. "Celestine, are you okay?" "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was terrified, barely audible. "Mom, I think they know." "Who knows what?" I demanded, already getting out of bed, reaching for clothes. "Corwin's family. I think they know I made copies. I think they're going to do something." Terror flooded through me. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm in the bathroom." I locked the door. "Corwin is acting strange. His father came over tonight and they were talking, and I heard them say your name and mention documents, and I think they're planning something, Mom. I'm scared." "Listen to me," I said, forcing calm into my voice, even though I was shaking. "You need to get out of there. Right now. Can you get to your car?" "I don't think so," she said. "Corwin took my keys. He said I didn't need them because he would drive me anywhere I needed to go." My blood ran cold. They had already started isolating her, controlling her movements. "Okay," I said. "Okay. Do you have your phone charger? Can you charge your phone in the bathroom?" "Yes," she said. "Then do that. Lock yourself in and don't come out. I'm calling the FBI right now. They're going to send people to get you out." "Mom, what if—" "No what ifs," I interrupted. "You are getting out of there tonight. Stay on the phone with me." She didn't respond. "Celestine?" I said urgently. "Celestine?" "Mom, someone is trying to open the door," she whispered. "Corwin is calling my name. I have to go. I have to—" "No, don't hang up. Celestine." The line went dead. I immediately called Agent Reeves's cell number. She answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the hour. "Agent Reeves, this is Mrs. Pierce. My daughter just called me. She thinks they know about the documents. She's locked in a bathroom and someone is trying to get in. She's in danger right now." "We're on it," Agent Reeves said. I heard her moving, heard voices in the background. Give me the address. I rattled off the address of Corwin's family estate. Stay by your phone, Agent Reeves said. We'll update you as soon as we can. She hung up. I stood in my bedroom, phone clutched in my hand, absolutely helpless. My daughter was trapped, possibly in immediate physical danger, and I could do nothing. I pulled on clothes with shaking hands and grabbed my car keys. The FBI had told me to stay by my phone, but I couldn't just stand here. I had to go. I had to be close, even if I couldn't help directly. The drive to Corwin's family estate took 30 minutes at that hour of the night with no traffic. I parked on the street outside the gates, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The property was dark except for a few lights on in the main house. I could see the long driveway stretching up to the imposing structure. Somewhere in there, my daughter was scared and alone. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. I kept checking my phone, willing it to ring, willing someone to tell me Celestine was safe. At 3:45, I saw headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Multiple vehicles. FBI vehicles, unmarked but obvious in their coordination. They pulled up to the gates, and I watched as agents got out, spoke into radios. The gates swung open. The vehicles moved up the driveway. I wanted to follow them, but I forced myself to stay where I was. I would only get in the way. More waiting. The worst waiting of my life. Then, at 4:07, according to my phone's clock, I saw more movement. The FBI vehicles were returning down the driveway, and in the second vehicle, I could see a familiar silhouette. Celestine. As the vehicles passed through the gates, I started my engine and followed them. They didn't stop me. They led me to a nondescript office building downtown, and when I parked and ran to the entrance, Agent Morrison was waiting. She's safe, he said. We got her out. Can I see her? I asked desperately. He nodded and led me inside, through a maze of corridors, to a small room furnished like a comfortable living room rather than an interrogation space. Celestine was sitting on a couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm night. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "Mom," she sobbed. I ran to her and held her as she cried, stroking her hair, whispering that she was safe now, that everything was going to be okay. Agent Reeves was there too, along with another agent I didn't recognize. When Celestine's sobs finally subsided, Agent Reeves explained what would happen next. "We're making arrests tonight," she said. "Corwin, his father, his mother, and approximately 20 other individuals, including several public officials. We've coordinated with multiple law enforcement agencies. By morning, the entire organization will be dismantled." "What about me?" Celestine asked in a small voice. "What happens to me now?" "You're a witness," Agent Reeves said gently. "An essential witness. We'll need your testimony, but you'll be protected, and you'll be free." Celestine looked at me. "The marriage?" "I think we can get it annulled," I said, looking at Agent Reeves for confirmation. She nodded. "Given the circumstances, coercion and threats, absolutely." "It was never a real marriage anyway," Celestine said bitterly. "It was a prison sentence." "Not anymore," I told her, squeezing her hand. "Not anymore, baby." We stayed in that office for hours while the FBI coordinated their raids. Gradually, reports came in. Arrests made, evidence seized, suspects in custody. By dawn, it was done. Corwin and his entire family were in federal custody, along with the corrupt officials who had been protecting them. The news broke that morning. It was huge, dominating every local channel and making national news by afternoon. The scope of the corruption, the number of people arrested, the amount of money involved, it was one of the biggest organized crime busts in the state's history. And at the center of it all was my daughter, the brave young woman who had discovered the truth and risked everything to make sure it came to light. The trial took months to prepare. Celestine gave her testimony, clear and compelling, describing how she had found the documents and what had happened when she tried to confront Corwin about them. She described the threats, the coercion, the fear. The defense attorneys tried to paint her as a willing participant who had gotten cold feet, but the evidence was overwhelming. The documents spoke for themselves. In the end, Corwin was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. His father got life. His mother, who had been more involved than anyone had initially realized, got 30 years. The corrupt officials also received substantial sentences. The organization that had operated for decades was destroyed completely. Celestine's marriage was annulled 3 months after the arrests. She moved back in with me while she recovered from the trauma and figured out her next steps. We spent a lot of time talking, processing what had happened, healing together. She's doing better now. She's returned to her medical residency, though she took a semester off to deal with everything. She's seeing a therapist, working through the psychological impact of what she endured. And slowly, she's rebuilding her life. As for me, I learned some hard lessons. I learned that perfect surfaces can hide terrible secrets. I learned that I should have listened more carefully when my daughter tried to talk to me. I learned that a mother's intuition is real and I should never ignore it again. But most importantly, I learned that my daughter is one of the strongest, bravest people I know. She could have stayed silent. She could have let fear win. Instead, she found a way to expose the truth, even when it meant sacrificing her own happiness and safety. On what would have been her first wedding anniversary, Celestine and I went to the beach. We walked along the shore, watching the waves, not saying much. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think I'll ever be able to trust someone again?" she asked. "To fall in love without being terrified?" I took her hand. "I think you will," I said. "It will take time, and it won't be easy. But you're strong, Celestine. You survived something that would have broken most people. You'll survive this too." She nodded, and we kept walking. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, peaceful, a stark contrast to the nightmare we had lived through. But we had lived through it. We had survived, and we would keep surviving, keep moving forward, keep building new and better lives out of the ashes of what had been destroyed. So, did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.